Hey, what's up YouTube? It's Logan, the Metal and Beer Snob, and I'm here tonight to go back in time 2 decades. We're going back to 2005, and I'm going to kind of put myself in the shoes of the average metal fan just getting into the genre at that time. Because I think there's certain albums that, any quote-unquote millennial metalhead holds in high regard that was released in 2005 that maybe other generations or eras of metal fans might snub their nose at. So I'm curious. I want to make a video specifically about those albums that really helped to form what metal was for a millennial metalhead from 2005. In for a beer. As it's a Friday night, I'm living the high life. Also, in the same way I'm showing off unsnobby-like things in metal, this is definitely not a beer for a snob. So, there you go. You know my name is fake as fuck. But hey, cheers. And for those aware, I actually made a video last year about albums from 2004 that helped shape millennial metalheads' musical tastes. And this is no different, but we're just moving 1 year ahead because it's interesting to me to look at how much the musical scene can change over the span of just a year when you look at it. And metal, of course, is no different, if not even more drastic when you're looking at the bigger, more commercial albums of the year that had success not only when they came out, but in the years after. So to kind of frame where I'm at in this conversation, I didn't really get into metal until 2009, 2010, 2011. So this is a couple years before my time, but as soon as I started to get into the genre, a whole bunch of the gateway albums and first albums I ended up stumbling upon, either in record stores or online, were albums from this middle 2000s era. So a lot of these albums really have helped shape my taste, or I just hold a very nostalgic love and fondness for them. I wanted to take the chance to highlight some albums that I think a millennial metalhead getting into metal around the 2005 era could have come across that would have helped shape their taste. Man, without further ado, let's kind of dive in. First, though, I want to talk about the trends that I noticed in 2005 that are kind of different from 2004. 2004, I showed a lot of metalcore. There were a lot of really big tentpole metalcore albums that came out in 2004. And kind of looking at metalcore, and especially these American metalcore bands that were kind of lumped into the new wave of American heavy metal, they're starting to kind of get phased out by the time 2005 wraps up, If you look at the albums that all came after the ones I mentioned in my 2004 video, they're all received less favorably, than the ones I mentioned. So I think the scene of metalcore, at least that style, was at its peak in 2003 and 2004. It hit almost by 2005. Those bands were starting to get on major labels, release lackluster albums, change their sound, and just not be as big as they used to be in the heart of, what fans wanted. A lot of other stuff started to pop into the metal scene that ended up having big careers for the next decade. For example, a lot of the modern prog stuff really came to light in 2005. In fact, I'm going to start off the video highlighting my biggest and favorite albums from this year, and they're all of the more prog-leaning persuasion. And then, of course, Deathcore starts to sneak in, and I'll include definitely some Deathcore discussion topics in here, so heads up. This will not be mentioned in the video, but in my research, early hints of that whole mallcore scene kind of start popping up. Like the swoopy hair, emo vibe starts to creep into some of these metal bands, quote unquote, in '05. But talking about the metalcore scene is not a video for me to make. So as mentioned, I first wanted to start the video with, to me, the biggest album to come out in 2005, especially in the context of metal as a whole and the direction that this band went in kind of shaping metal of the next 20 years. I'm talking about Gojira, and this is their third album, From Mars to Sirius. Yeah, this came out in September of '05, and this is a near masterpiece of an album to me, and Gojira is one of my all-time favorite bands. It definitely stems back to this album right here. One of the first songs by Gojira that I heard, and really one of the first extreme metal songs I stumbled into, was Backbone. And that song kind of scared me in the beginning, but then gradually began to blow me away every time I would hear it. There's Morbid Angel riffs in there, there's blast beats, there's tremolo picking. It's phenomenal. And then, I mean, this is a concept album. Some of the best riffs of the decade are found on here, like The Heaviest Matter of the Universe, Flying Whales, From the Sky, Ocean Planet. I could just name every single song, almost. This is probably my favorite album that I'm going to show tonight, and I figured I'd start off with this one, because I think this is the biggest album of 2005, at least for this video, and for Millennial Metalheads. From my experience, I kind of use Gojira as a litmus test. If I see someone who could be a metalhead, and who is around my age or younger, I'm like, you know, have you heard of Gojira? And if they have, and it's one of the albums from the 2000s, and especially this one, we're good. We're good. We're on similar ground. And this album right here is guaranteed going to push you to more extreme kinds of metal. And I think that's going to be a trend for the albums I'm going to talk about in this video versus my 2004 one. I feel like these albums are going to absolutely push you in the extreme metal direction. And maybe the 2004 ones could just be a scene kid having a summer of metaldom. But stuff like this, it makes you want to listen to more metal, I guarantee it. So, number one pick, absolutely, Gojira, From Mars to Sirius. Number two, another huge and important progressive metal band for me, Between the Buried and Me, Alaska. This album has BT Bam, if you will, really starting to come into their own. From my perspective, it's still overshadowed significantly by the album that comes after it, 2007's Colors. So much so that preparing for this video was the first time I've heard it in a couple years. But it's still a phenomenal album, in that 8 to 9 range as far as a score or rating goes. It's a perfect bridge for their more hardcore, metalcore oriented sound, going into this interesting progressive metal direction that they continue to explore through the rest of their careers. The opening song, All Bodies, is absolutely beautiful. It features some clean singing by Giles, the lead vocalist, which really is just breathtaking. But from there, it goes back and forth between more progressive leaning music and this pummeling hardcore, metalcore oriented sound, which I think really has not been replicated. I mean, I will say Between the Buried and Me have always had one of the most unique sounds out there when it comes to modern day progressive metal. So, cheers to them. On the progressive leaning tracks, Selkies, The Endless Obsession is phenomenal. Backwards Marathon is also a beautiful track. But then you also get the heavy, just mosh-inducing songs like Alaska and Robo Turner. It's a fun, varied album which shows this band right before they really hit big and right when they're starting to find their full sound. Then from there, this band needs no introduction. They're huge right now in the modern era. They just headlined a tour with Carcass opening, of all fucking bands. Meshuggah. And this is their 2005 album, Catch 33. I believe it was released May of 2005, which makes this over 20 years old. So I'm a huge Meshuggah fan. Like, I think Meshuggah might be a band that, along with Gojira, really helped to shape the millennial metal spectrum. You know, if you're looking at it from a prog side of thing, Gent happened for a reason. The fans gathered around like what Periphery and Animals as Leaders was doing, and that would not happen without Meshuggah and albums like Catch 33. This one's a unique one for their discography because it's a one long song kind of album. Like, they do break it up on here, but it works best absorbed as one long piece. It's kind of tough to get into. This one, when I first got it back in the day, it gave me some work for sure. But there's killer moments on here, along with a lot of building. There are just the heaviest Meshuggah style riffs that you could think of. Like, the transition from Mind's Mirror to In Death Is Life is so crushing. It's insane. It blows me away every time. And then as that long song progresses into In Death Is Death, great title, the riff changes up and gets even like heavier and slower somehow. I mean, some of the best Meshuggah riffs are on this album, and I've just spent so long listening to it. Like, this might be the first Meshuggah album I actually bought. It's ingrained. Like, every single moment on this album is up in here. I'm fully on board, and I just like the flow of it, how it kind of comes in like a wrecking ball, and then it kind of goes out on the slower, more hypnotic tracks like Shed and Some. And then from there, we're visiting two metalcore bands that actually caught my interest from this year. And they're definitely distinct and different from the metalcore that came before that I talked about. Previous video, I was all about Unearth, Shadows Fall, and Diecast. This video, though, it's 2005. We've gotten past that whole Boston metalcore scene. We're looking at Buffalo, New York, for example, with Every Time I Die. And yeah, this is Gutter Phenomenon. This album right here is kind of interesting in the metalcore scene, and really, Every Time I Die has always been a very interesting band for me. And they are a band that I enjoy most, if not all, of their discography. This right here is their third album. It features a lot of big singles that I listened to way back when I was first getting into metal, like Kill the Music and The New Black. I'm not as big a fan of this as I am of like their later work. For me, X Lives is when I came into the music scene, and that's what Every Time I Die was releasing, but this is still a very interesting album in the Every Time I Die catalog. I think it sees them exploring this southern groove and riffage style, which is unique to them in metalcore of this era. And just the vocals by Keith Buckley are over the top and insane. Definitely an album that I recommend, especially if you're looking for more earlier Every Time I Die, but just know for me, they get better from here. And this is more of like a cool, you know, seeing how they incorporate those southern rock influences into their abrasive, drunk metalcore swagger. And then this is the big controversial pick of the evening. I deserve any hate you want to throw at me, so get your tomatoes ready. This band is indeed maligned a little bit in the underground metal community, and as it should be. They've had a very interesting trajectory, and we're about to talk about the debut album from Parkway Drive, Killing with a Smile. So this is an Australian metalcore album, with this album coming out on Epitaph, produced by Adam Dutquiz from Killswitch Engage. So these Australian boys just tap in to this very breakdown heavy, very angst-ridden, but honest metalcore sound. And for whatever reason, this really hooked me. I don't know. Like, there's a bunch of other bands playing similar in this that I would never ever touch. But for whatever reason, Parkway Drive is probably one of my favorite metalcore bands. I am indeed a poser. This is not my favorite album by them. In fact, I think it's a fairly flawed album for their debut, but they're a bunch of kids, you know? I'm sure they were all teenagers, early 20s when this came out. And I think they went on to tighten the songwriting a little bit and make even more impactful music on the subsequent 2 to 3 albums that they released. This one, though, is fun for different reasons. It really does just sound like a bunch of young kids trying to jam as many sick breakdowns and shout-outs as possible into music. Like, that's all these songs are like, you know, cool melody, breakdown, cool melody, pause. Then the vocalist shouts out something ridiculous. Like the one song on here, Romance is Dead, features the shout out, cry me a river, bitch, and then it drops. It's so stupid, but it's so fucking good, and it makes you want to mosh every time. There's a couple songs on here like that, but I want to lose my metal card any more than I already have, so I'm going to put this one aside. And then, from the metalcore, because really, that's it for metalcore stuff I was super into from 2005. We're going to more of, like, almost death metal territory. So this first one is an interesting one. This is A Life Once Lost with their third album, Hunter. And look at that fucking awful hype sticker. You can't even tell what this album is. Whoever approved that should be drug out into the street and shot. Here's the actual cover. But yeah, these guys are an interesting band for sure. And maybe not interesting for the reason that you would automatically think. They've never really found their sound. This album, for example, is Lamb of God Worship. It's very much in the vein of As the Palaces Burn, with maybe a little bit of the melodies from Ashes of the Wake thrown in. It's nothing super original, but at the same time, it's a bit scrappier and more pissed off than Lamb of God. It's like raw. And I've always admired that. And I, back in the day, you know, I stumbled across their video for Vulture. Vulture is a sick fucking song. Great jam. And there's a couple other awesome songs on here too. I mean, Needleman, Russian Siege with Pitiless Blows. It's quick, it's mean. It does incorporate a little bit of that melodic death metal kind of vibe at times. The vocal performance is almost like a hardcore vocalist, but not quite. The thing with this band is they kind of progress in a weird way too. From here, trying to sound like Lamb of God, they end up trying to sound like Meshuggah before they broke up, you know? And it kind of just leaves them with not much identity, which is a bummer, because I think they're a good band and I have a lot of respect for them. And whenever I see their albums for a decent used price, I pick them up. And this is my favorite that I have found by them so far. And then from there, we're going straight into death metal territory with melodic death metal. Okay, not quite death metal, but melodic death metal. The Swedish melodic death metal scene was starting to break into America at this point. Of course, they were a couple years earlier with In Flames, but they really were starting to break in. And Dark Tranquillity's album Character was the first one that I stumbled upon. And this is honestly a vicious album. Like, it's fast-paced. It's not like super hyper melodic if you are a new metal fan. Like, now that I'm a little bit more experienced, I realize how catchy all these songs are. Back in the day, some of these felt really intense and kind of brutal. I will say for me, there's a sweet spot in the middle, in the beginning and kind of middle of the album where it's just perfect song after perfect song. Out of Nothing, The Endless Feed, Lost to Apathy. Those three songs are phenomenal. Out of Nothing is like a fairly straightforward but just super catchy melodic death metal track. And then Endless Feed is the slower, almost ballad, but it's not, because it's still brutal, and it still has the elements that make Dark Tranquility. And there's a good like keyboard approach to it as well. And then finally, Lost to Apathy is an anthem of all anthems. The chorus will just be stuck in your head for days. And then all the songs on here are good. And truthfully, I just appreciate there's no clean singing on this. I'm fine with Michael as a clean singing vocalist, but I really enjoy that on this album they really went for the throat, but they did not lose the songwriting prowess that they gained from incorporating him as a clean singer. So, yeah, this is a special one, I think. Character. And then from there, we kind of go to a dirty album, I feel like. For me, and I'm sure others as well. Soilwork. This album right here, Stabbing the Drama, signaled what melodic death metal was going to continue to be for the rest of the decade. We've got a phenomenal vocalist who can basically do pop vocals if he wanted to in, Bjorn Strid, and a band who is willing to give him room in almost hard rock, pop rock hooks to pull it off. And it's a good album. There's good songs on here, and tracks like the singles, of course, Stabbing the Drama and Nerve, were very important in my metal development. I remember stumbling across those songs and immediately downloading them and wondering, who is this band? Is this the best Soilwork album? No. But it is still worthwhile to mention, and I'm happy I own it. I'm fine that it's a promo. And then from there, we go to full death metal with what is probably the most important death metal band for us millennials. And listen, I will jock this band all day, every day. So here is, for me, one of the most important death metal bands to come out of the 2000s, the Black Dahlia Murder, with their album Miasma. You could call them deathcore or metalcore or whatever, but at this point, I don't hear it. They are pretty vicious death metal, especially on this album. It's so good. This is the only album I have on CD and on vinyl. Oh, it's on white. I'm a big fan of these guys, and I basically enjoy every single album they've done. And this is no different. This one right here especially is savage and to the point. It might be their shortest album at like 33 minutes. I will admit it is not my favorite in their discography. Like if I were to rank it, it would be towards the bottom. And I think it's because some of the tracks do blend in a little bit for me. But there's still great songs on here, and I think the album as a whole flows very well. Tracks like Statutory Ape, A Vulgar Picture, and the title track Miasma are top notch. Miasma especially is a great way to end the album. Love Black Dahlia Murder. I want to talk about them more than I do, so heads up. Rest in peace, Trevor, and cheers to these guys. And then the final album that I'm going to show tonight of my collection, I'm going to talk about a few more, but the final one I'm going to show starts to bridge into that deathcore territory. We're talking about the Red Chord with Clients. So this is the Red Chord's second album, and it is monumental. And this is not deathcore like Whitechapel or Suicide Silence deathcore. This is unique and experimental and very much still rooted in the hardcore scene, but it's brutal. It's brutal at the same time. They took what they did on Fused Together and Revolving Doors and really made it a bit more streamlined and commercial, but without losing any of the weirdness or brutality that they had. In fact, I think they incorporate a little bit more groove-heavy riffage, which I really like. Tracks like Lay the Tarp and Ant-Man are just seething with groovy intensity. I love it. But then at the same time, we still get like super intense, almost grind-like songs with Fixation on Plastics and the title track. And there is a breakdown or two in here, but I mean, this is not deathcore in the way that you think of deathcore. So, to me, this is a album that really shows what a genre could have been, but ended up not being because of a band I will mention further down the road. One last highlight from Clients, the closing track, He Was Dead When I Got There, is such a different song from the rest of the album. It's phenomenal, it's instrumental, it sounds sludgy, it sounds bluesy. I love it. Here's a clip. Alright, so now I'm going to run through some other albums that I think are definitely noteworthy, but I just don't own, and you know, they're the ones that maybe I didn't connect with, but other millennial metalheads or other metalheads in general might have a very fond appreciation for. So, without further ado, probably the biggest actual album, like looking back on it, in this scene from 2005 would be Avenged Sevenfold's City of Evil. I did own this back in the day. I mainly owned it for backcountry, and the fact, like, literally everyone who was into, you know, quote-unquote heavy music was into Avenged Sevenfold. Like, you could not escape this band, and I truthfully did not. I owned a couple back in the day. I would rebuy one or two of them, maybe, and depending on the price, like if it was $1 to $3, I would buy this one. The Beast and the Harlot is a phenomenal song, no matter what anyone said. I think Avenged Sevenfold was probably the biggest band to really make a foothold and name for themselves in 2005. And then the other two bands that almost rival Gojira and Avenged Sevenfold in name just did a quote-unquote tour that kind of blew up in their faces. It was a little funny to watch, but Bullet for My Valentine with their album Poison, and Trivium with their album Ascendancy. Bullet for My Valentine, I only ever really liked one or two songs. That main track from this album, Tears Don't Fall, is great. Never really got into them besides that, but I think it is a big album for other people. Trivium is similar, and I don't know why I've never gotten into Trivium. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe I'm not a fan of Matt Heffy's vocals or the songwriting, but they've never clicked for me. I know they're a big band, and Ascendancy is a big album, so here's the mention. And then going into the more like mathcore and progressive range, we've got Norma Jean with their album Oh God, The Aftermath. I'm actually a big fan of these guys, and I do enjoy this album. I just don't have it currently. I did in the day and sold it, but you know, it is what it is. But these guys play Dillinger Escape Plan core almost perfectly. It's great, and this album is no different, so no hate there. The other progressive leaning album I want to mention is Protest the Hero with their debut Kezia. And I've never been able to get into this album. I like the band's next album, Fortress, but this one has just never clicked for me for whatever reason. And I don't know, Protest the Hero are a weird band. Like, I'm not sure if I get the vocal style or what they're fully trying to do, and like, I barely get Fortress, truthfully, but I gotta mention them because I know they're a big band from this era. From there, going into metalcore / melodic death metal, Darkest Hour released Undoing Ruin in 2005, and I'm actually a big Darkest Hour fan, and I do like this album. It's a crime I don't own it, and I should have talked about it more, but them's the facts. Great album, though. Chimera released their self-titled album, Chimera, also. And Chimera is actually another band I'll chalk up to never clicking with. Not sure why. I like songs, but albums I've purchased one or two through the years, and it doesn't stay with me. But this one I think is one of the better of their discography. And then going for like a straight up melodic death metal band from Finland, of all places, Children of Bodom's Are You Dead Yet? And this is such a weird fucking album to me, because this was huge, and it really put Children of Bodom on the map. in North America, and it was largely because they were featured in Guitar Hero. Children of Bodom is another band I don't fully get and click with. I have a couple of their albums, but yeah, I don't revisit them as much as I should. So, and then finally we get to the Deathcore. So I think 2005 is basically the birth of what the modern Deathcore scene ends up being. And that is thanks to two things: MySpace and this one band called Job for a Cowboy. And they released an EP back in 2005 called Doom. And of course they released the main song on MySpace, Entombment of a Machine, and it blew up. It's honestly kind of crazy that it did, because it's a fairly extreme song. If you listen to it, it does have death metal in it significantly. There's of course breakdown after breakdown, and there's pig squeals, so if you're not a fan of that, don't check it out. But I'm gonna say it's not bad, and I don't think this EP is bad. I do like probably like 50 to 60% of it. At the same time though, it somehow launched this genre to be what it became. It needs to be talked about in the scope of 2005. Another band that didn't quite get the hype of Job for a Cowboy back in 2005, but somehow has had more staying power, is Despised Icon with their album The Healing Process. So I've not really clicked with Despised Icon either, but I do like a couple songs and I enjoy what they do, and I don't think they're a bad band. So I wanted to mention them. That's all I have to talk about with 2005 releases. I think that was enough. I covered probably 20. Hey, sound off below. I'm curious. Are you a fan of the albums that I talked about in this video, or do you not think they're true metal or a good representation of what metal was and is? I want all of the answers, the good and the bad and the ugly. I'll turn in my metal card tomorrow, I promise. If you do enjoy this scene and kind of relate to a little bit of what I'm talking about, I'd love to know that too. Are there other albums that came out in this year that are important to you as a metalhead, but also might not be, classic canon? Either way, I appreciate you. Thanks for watching this video, and cheers. Listen to good metal, drink good beer.